Her husband abandoned her and their triplets, unaware they will later become billionaire, so he sought for a richer, wealthier woman, 3 mouths to feed, and none of them worth my time. You and those brats will only drag me down. Those were the heartless words of the man who once vowed to love her. He abandoned his wife and their triplets in search of a better life with a wealthier woman, leaving her to carry the weight of shame, hunger, and heartbreak alone. To him, she was nothing but a burden. To him, her children were curses, not blessings. But sometimes the stones rejected by others become the very foundation the world can't ignore. Years later, the tables turned in ways no one could have imagined, and the man who mocked his own blood would come face to face with the price of his betrayal. This is the story of a mother left to suffer, and the children who carried a destiny greater than anyone believed. And today, it is being retold by me. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please, subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The kitchen smelled faintly of boiled rice and soap. Clara stood by the sink, her hands trembling as she rinsed a small bottle. Her 3 newborns, Ethan, Isabella, and Lucas, lay in a basket near the table, bundled in thin blankets. Their tiny cries rose and fell like fragile notes in the air. Nathaniel stormed into the room, his footsteps heavy, his jaw clenched. He glanced at the children and then at Clara, his eyes sharp with disgust. 3 mouths to feed, he muttered, shaking his head. Then his voice rose into a harsh roar. 3 mouths to feed, and none of them worth my time. You and those brats will drag me into the gutter. I deserve better than this. Clara turned, startled. Her lips parted as if to answer, but no sound came. She looked at him, her husband, the man who once held her hand under the stars and promised to protect her. "Nathan, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They're your children too. They didn't ask to be born into this. They need their father." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Father? Don't insult me. A man like me doesn't belong in a cage like this, scraping for pennies while you cling to 3 wailing mistakes." He pointed toward the basket. "Look at them, crying, needing, demanding. What did I ever do to deserve this prison?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You said you wanted a family. You said you loved me. That was before I realized what you really were," Nathan snapped, his tone cut like glass. "A charity case. I lifted you up from nothing, Clara, and this is how you repay me, by chaining me with 3 mouths that will bleed me dry. You've ruined my life." Her knees weakened, but she steadied herself on the sink. "They're not chains, Nathan. They're blessings. Our children, blessings." His voice dripped with scorn. "No, Clara. They are curses. Curses that will swallow me whole if I stay. Do you think I was meant for this? To rot in this cramped house, to work myself to death for 3 parasites, and a wife too weak to stand on her own?" Clara pressed a hand to her chest, as if his words had pierced her. "You're their father. You can't just walk away. I can," Nathan said coldly. "And I will, because I deserve better. I deserve a woman who understands power, who can give me the life I deserve. Not a whining wife clinging to my ankles, begging me to stay." Clara froze. Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" Nathan's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "I'm saying I've found someone else. Someone who sees my worth. Victoria knows what it means to live. She has money, influence, class. She is the kind of woman who fits beside me. Not you." Clara's face went pale. She gripped the edge of the sink so hard her knuckles turned white. "Victoria? The widow?" "Yes," Nathan sneered. "And unlike you, she won't drown me in diapers and poverty. With her, I will rise. With you, I will only sink." The babies stirred in their basket, their cries growing louder as if they sensed the storm in the room. Clara moved toward them instinctively, shielding them with her body. Her voice broke. "How can you stand there and say these things? They are your flesh, your blood. You vowed before God to stand by us. God." Nathan spat. "God won't pay the bills, Clara. God won't put me in the circles I belong. Stop clinging to fairy tales. You and those brats are dead weight, and I will not carry you another day." Clara shook her head, tears falling freely now. "Please, please don't do this." But Nathan only stepped closer, towering over her. His voice dropped, each word dripping venom. "One day, Clara, you and your cursed children will beg on the streets while I dine with kings." The words sliced through her like a knife. She wanted to scream, to strike him, to make him take it back, but all she could do was hold her children tighter as Nathan turned on his heel and stormed out of the kitchen. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the small house. Clara sank to her knees beside the basket, sobbing silently. She pressed her lips to each of her babies' heads, whispering through her tears. "They see burdens. I see destiny. They see curses. I see blessings. One day, my loves, the world will know your names." Her children whimpered softly, unaware of the storm that had just torn their family apart. But Clara knew. And as the night closed in, she felt the weight of betrayal, shame, and fear pressing on her shoulders. Still, somewhere deep inside, a small flame flickered. 2 days later, Clara found herself sitting at a long wooden table in Nathan's parents' dining room. She had begged him not to force her into this gathering, but he insisted. The smell of roasted meat and wine filled the air, but Clara could hardly breathe. She held Ethan in her arms, while Isabella and Lucas lay in a cradle beside her chair. Nathan sat at the head of the table, his chin high, his eyes sharp. His mother Margaret leaned close to him, whispering with a smug smile. His father, George, poured himself another drink, already laughing too loudly. "So," George said, raising his glass, "my son finally makes a decision worthy of his name." Clara stiffened, her fingers tightened around Ethan's small body. "What decision?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Nathan smirked. He tapped his glass with a fork, calling for silence. The chatter at the table died down. "I might as well tell you now," he said. "I'm leaving, Clara." The words fell like thunder. Clara gasped, her lips parting. "Nathan, no. Please." But Margaret cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Good. About time, son. We told you from the beginning she was never good enough for you. A poor little girl trying to wear a crown. She dragged you down, and now she's dragging these poor children into the mud with her." Clara's cheeks burned hot, but she stayed silent, her eyes fixed on her babies. Nathan continued, his voice loud and cold. "I refuse to waste my life tied to a woman who offers me nothing. She was a burden when I married her, and now, with 3 mouths screaming at me, she's a chain around my neck. Enough is enough." George clapped the table. "That's my boy. Finally seeing sense. Clara, you should be grateful he gave you his name at all. Without Nathan, you'd still be scrubbing floors." Tears blurred Clara's vision. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "Nathan, we are your family. These children are your legacy. How can you shame us like this?" Nathan sneered. "Legacy? Don't make me laugh. These aren't the heirs I dreamed of. Look at them. Frail, needy, nothing like the empire I will build. No, Clara, they are not my legacy. My true legacy will be forged with someone who knows her worth." A murmur rippled across the table. His words were heavy, deliberate. Clara's stomach sank as realization struck. "Victoria," she whispered. Nathan smiled cruelly. "Yes, Victoria, a woman of wealth, of class. She understands power. With her, I will rise to the life I was meant to live. A life with dignity, with status, with riches, not this." He waved a hand at Clara and the children, his face twisted in disgust. Margaret leaned back in her chair, satisfied. At last my son will have a wife who suits him. Clara, you were always too plain, too weak. It's best you accept this now. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to fight, but her voice betrayed her. All she could manage was a whisper. And what of me? What of your children? Nathan stood, pushing his chair back with a loud scrape. What of you? You will fend for yourself. As for those children, he looked at the cradle with cold eyes. They will grow up to be as useless as their mother. That is not my concern. Gasps rose around the table, but Nathan didn't flinch. He reached for his coat, straightening it with pride. At that moment, the doors to the dining hall opened, and Victoria walked in. Dressed in silk, her jewels glittering, she moved gracefully to Nathan's side and took his arm. Together, they stood before Clara, a picture of wealth and power. Nathan's smile was sharp as he leaned closer, delivering the final blow. One day, Clara, you and your cursed children will beg on the streets while I dine with kings. The room erupted with laughter. George, Margaret, and even a few cousins joined in. Clara sat frozen, her face wet with tears, clutching Ethan to her chest. The cradle rocked beside her as Isabella and Lucas whimpered at the noise. Nathan didn't look back. Arm in arm with Victoria, he walked out the door, leaving Clara behind. Silence fell once the laughter died. Clara could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She bent over the cradle, gathering her children close. Her tears dropped onto their small faces, but she forced a trembling smile. They see burdens, she whispered, kissing each tiny forehead. I see destiny. They see curses. I see blessings. One day, my loves, one day the world will know your names. The candles flickered, shadows stretching across the walls. Alone, humiliated, and stripped of everything, Clara cradled her children with both arms. The dining room that once echoed with Nathan's voice now felt like a tomb, silent and cold. But deep in Clara's chest, beneath the crushing pain, something stirred. A quiet fire. A promise that even betrayal could not kill. The promise that her children would rise. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give future to children and women abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing to hitting the subscribe button and turning on your notification bell. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching us from and how this story hit home for you. The winter wind howled through the narrow streets as Clara walked home from her job. Her hands were raw from scrubbing floors all day, and her back ached as if it carried stones. She held a small paper bag close to her chest. Inside was a loaf of bread, a little milk, and nothing more. It had cost her nearly all the coins she had earned, but it would be enough to keep her babies fed for another day. Her tiny house looked worn and tired, its roof patched with scraps of tin, its windows rattling with each gust of wind. Inside, Ethan, Isabella, and Lucas lay on a blanket near the fire, their cheeks pale but their eyes bright as they looked up at her. Clara forced a smile, though her heart felt heavy. "Mama's home," she whispered, kneeling down. She tore the bread into small pieces, dipping each in the milk before feeding them one by one. She chewed on nothing but the crust herself, swallowing quickly before they noticed. The door creaked open, and a neighbor stepped in, Mrs. Turner, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She glanced at the children and then at Clara's thin face. "Still here?" Mrs. Turner said with a snort. "I thought by now Nathan would have sent for you. Or at least tossed a coin your way." Clara straightened, her voice quiet but steady. "He doesn't send anything." "Of course not," Mrs. Turner said. "He's too busy riding in carriages with Victoria. I saw them just yesterday laughing as they passed the market. My, she looked grand. And you—" She paused, her lips curling. "Well," You look like the ghost of the woman you once were. Clara felt her cheeks burn, but she said nothing. She turned back to her children, brushing a curl from Isabella's forehead. Mrs. Turner leaned closer, lowering her voice. You should know, Nathan's been bragging around town. Says you're rotting in poverty where you belong. Says those babies of yours are proof of your failure. Clara's throat tightened, but she refused to cry in front of her. She pressed her lips together until they hurt. Mrs. Turner shrugged. People talk, Clara. They say you should have known better. Marrying above your station never ends well. With that, she left, closing the door with a sharp snap. Clara sat still for a long moment, her children's soft breaths filling the silence. Finally, she whispered, Don't listen to them, my loves. You are not proof of failure. You are proof of life, of hope. Someday they'll see days turned into weeks, and Clara's life became a rhythm of endless labor. She scrubbed the floors of rich homes, washed clothes until her knuckles bled, and swept shop fronts for a few coins. She rose before dawn and returned after sunset, always with just enough food to keep her children alive. One afternoon, as she left a merchant's house carrying a bucket of dirty water, a loud laugh rang. Out Clara froze. A fine carriage had stopped nearby, and inside sat Nathan and Victoria. Victoria wore a gown of deep red silk, her fingers sparkling with jewels. Nathan leaned back against the cushions, a smug grin on his face. Well, look who it is, Nathan called out through the open window, his voice carried down the street. The little beggar and her brood. Clara's stomach twisted, but she held the bucket steady. Victoria leaned forward, her smile cold. Nathan, don't be cruel. She looked so pitiful. It almost makes me want to toss her a coin. She reached into her purse and pulled out a silver piece, holding it between two fingers. Shall I, darling? Or will it insult her pride? Nathan chuckled. Don't waste your silver. She's not worth it. Let her earn her keep scrubbing floors. That's all she's good for. People on the street turned to stare, whispering behind their hands. Clara felt the sting of their eyes, but she refused to bow her head. She lifted the bucket, walked past the carriage, and never looked back. But once she turned the corner, tears spilled down her cheeks. She leaned against a wall, her breath shaking. Why, Lord? Why this shame? Still, when she reached home, she wiped her tears away before stepping inside. The children rushed to her, their small feet pattering across the floor. Ethan tugged at her skirt. Isabella reached up with her tiny hands, and Lucas beamed with a smile that could melt the coldest heart. Clara knelt down, gathering them into her arms. You are my pride, she whispered fiercely. Not my shame. Never forget that spring came slowly, bringing a little warmth, but no ease to Clara's life. The children were growing, their small hands clutching at her skirts as she worked, their bright eyes following every move she made. They laughed when she smiled, and they grew quiet when she wept in the night, though she tried her best to hide it. Food was still scarce. Some nights, Clara ate nothing, pretending she wasn't hungry so the children could have her share. Her body grew thinner, her dresses hanging loosely, but her spirit refused to break. One morning, as she was sweeping the step outside her small home, an old man walked by. He paused, leaning on his cane, his eyes resting on the triplets playing nearby with sticks and stones. Fine children, he said, his voice deep and steady. Clara looked up, surprised. Most people avoided her, or stared with pity. Thank you, Mr. Howard, she said softly. Mr. Howard had lived in the neighborhood for years. A retired businessman, he kept mostly to himself. His hair was white, his face weathered, but his eyes still carried a sharpness that spoke of wisdom. He nodded toward the children. They seem clever. Look at that boy, Ethan, is it? See how he arranges those sticks? Not random. He's building something in his mind. Clara glanced at Ethan. He was indeed lining the sticks in careful rows, tapping each one as if testing their place. Beside him, Lucas counted them aloud, his small voice steady. Isabella, meanwhile, bossed both boys around, telling them where each stick should go. Clara smiled faintly. "They keep me going," she whispered. Mr. Howard studied her. "You work hard, Clara. Too hard. I see you leave before sunrise, come home after dark, and still you stand straight." That says something. Clara's eyes filled, but she quickly blinked away the tears. "I do it for them. They deserve better than this life." Mr. Howard leaned closer, his voice lower. "Don't let anyone tell you they are curses. I've built empires, lost fortunes, seen men rise and fall. I know promise when I see it. These three, they carry it in their blood." Clara's chest tightened. "You really think so?" "I know so," he said simply. Then he straightened, tapping his cane on the ground. "Let them come, by my house in the afternoons. I'll teach them things, numbers, letters, the way the world works. A strong mind can lift a man higher than gold." Clara's voice trembled. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," he said, already turning away. "Just make sure they learn." From that day forward, the triplets visited Mr. Howard. His house was filled with books and old ledgers, and though his body was weak, his mind was sharp. Ethan was drawn to puzzles. He loved pulling apart small gadgets Mr. Howard gave him and putting them back together. He asked questions no other child his age would think to ask. Why does this gear move? What happens if I change it? Lucas had a gift for numbers. He counted everything, pebbles, steps, even raindrops. Soon he was solving sums faster than Clara herself could. Isabella, however, was different. She wasn't content with learning alone. She wanted to lead. She arranged her brothers into little teams, assigning tasks, correcting mistakes, and even making speeches, her tiny hands waving as if she already stood before a crowd. Clara watched with wonder. Each evening she tucked them into bed and whispered, "You are not poor. You are rich, rich in mind, rich in heart. Never forget it." But the world was still cruel. When Clara walked through the market, whispers followed her. There she is, the abandoned one. Those children will never be anything. Just mouths to feed. She should have left town years ago. Clara kept her chin high, though each word cut her like a blade. At home, she told her children, "Never repay evil with evil." Do you hear me? Rise so high the world can't deny your worth. That is how you answer cruelty. One night after a long day, Isabella asked, "Mama, why does father hate us?" Clara froze, her heart breaking. She gathered the three into her arms, holding them close. "He doesn't see you for who you are," she said softly. "But one day you'll shine so bright that even the blind will see." Ethan whispered, "We'll make you proud, Mama." "You already do," Clara replied, her voice thick with emotion. Weeks passed, and their gifts grew sharper. Mr. Howard often shook his head in amazement. "These children, Clara, they are not ordinary. One day, they will change everything." Clara listened, her heart swelling with both pride and fear. Could it be true? Could her children, mocked as curses, one day become blessings too great for the world to ignore? Late one night, she sat by the fire, watching her babies sleep. She whispered into the dark, "Nathan thinks you are nothing. The world laughs at us. But I believe in you. I believe with all my soul." And as the flames flickered, Clara felt that quiet fire within her grow stronger. Her children were her suffering, but they were also her strength. Her silent strength. 15 years passed, like a whisper in the wind. The triplets were no longer children chasing sticks in the dirt. They were adults, tall and strong, their eyes carrying the fire of everything their mother had endured. Ethan with his calm mind and sharp hands, had become a genius in technology. He built systems and apps that changed the way businesses moved. Lucas, steady and disciplined, mastered finance. Numbers bent to his will like they had when he was a boy counting stones by the river. Isabella, bold and commanding, was the voice of them all, the leader who could charm, persuade, and command respect in any room. Together they formed a company called Howard Innovations, in honor of the man who had once opened his doors to them. Mr. Howard, though frail with age, had given them their first loan, believing in them when no one else did. Clara had stood beside her children through every struggle, her pride unshaken, her tears often hidden. Now the company was more than just a business. It was an empire. Their mix of cutting-edge technology and real estate solutions spread across the country. Headlines filled the papers. Howard siblings disrupt industry. Young visionaries rise to power. Triplets build multi-billion fortune. The same streets that once whispered against Clara now buzzed with admiration. Neighbors who had mocked her years ago boasted, "We knew them when they were children." But Clara never forgot the long years of shame. She simply smiled quietly, knowing the truth. It was not luck, but perseverance that had brought her children this far. Meanwhile, Nathan's life took a different turn. For years, he had lived comfortably in Victoria's mansion, dining at tables that glittered with silverware, drinking wine that cost more than Clara earned in months. He wore fine suits, drove fast cars, and sneered at the world below him. But wealth built on arrogance is fragile. Victoria's businesses began to falter. A string of lawsuits drained her accounts. Risky investments collapsed. The empire she flaunted crumbled piece by piece. At first, Nathan ignored the signs, telling himself they were temporary setbacks. But when creditors came knocking, when properties were seized, when the newspapers printed headlines about Victoria's losses, Nathan's world cracked. Victoria turned cold. One night she faced him across their lavish dining table. "Nathan," she said sharply, "I cannot carry dead weight." He stared at her, confused. "Dead weight?" "Yes," she snapped. "You've given me nothing. You bring no money, no power, no solutions. You only take." His jaw clenched. "I gave you my loyalty." "My name," Victoria laughed, cruel and sharp. "Your name? Don't flatter yourself. Your name means nothing. And your loyalty." She leaned closer, her voice dripping with scorn. "You left your wife and children for me. A man who betrays his own blood cannot speak of loyalty." Her words hit like a whip. "Victoria," he began, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. "It's over. Pack your things. You'll find no comfort here." That night, Nathan left the mansion with nothing but a suitcase. For the first time in years, he felt the sting of cold air without a carriage to shield him. He walked through the same streets where once he had mocked Clara, but now the whispers followed him. "There's Nathan, the one Victoria threw out. He's broke now. Serves him right. Did you hear? Even his old friends won't take his calls. His pride shattered, his pockets empty. His so-called friends turned their backs." One evening, as Nathan sat in a dim tavern nursing a cheap drink, his eyes caught the screen mounted on the wall. The news anchor's voice rang clear. "Once again, the Howard siblings have stunned the market with their latest project, a billion-dollar development that combines technology and real estate in ways never seen before. Ethan, Isabella, and Lucas Howard continue to rise as some of the most powerful young entrepreneurs in the country. They will be honored this week at a prestigious gala attended by global leaders and investors, the screen lit up with their faces. Ethan's sharp gaze, Lucas's confident smile, Isabella's commanding presence. Together they looked unstoppable. Nathan froze, staring, his drink forgotten. The names, Ethan, Isabella, Lucas, echoed in his mind. "No," he whispered. His hands trembled. It can't be. But deep down, he knew. The children he had once called curses. The children he had spat on, mocked, and abandoned. The children he had sworn would beg on the streets. They were the Howard siblings, and they had risen higher than even his wildest dreams. Nathan's heart pounded. Shame burned his chest, but desperation pushed it aside. I have to see them, he muttered to himself. I have to make them remember me. I can still fix this. His chance would come at the gala. The night of the gala shimmered with wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the carpet stretched out like a river of red velvet. Politicians, CEOs, and celebrities moved through the hall, glasses of champagne in hand, their laughter filling the air. Nathan stood outside, his suit worn and out of fashion, borrowed from a distant cousin who no longer returned his calls. His shoes were scuffed, his hair poorly combed. He looked nothing like the man who once paraded through these same circles on Victoria's arm. He stared at the golden doors, his heart hammered in his chest. This is my chance, he whispered. They'll see me, they'll remember, and everything will change. He forced himself inside, ignoring the guards who eyed him suspiciously. The grand hall nearly blinded him with its brilliance. Music played softly from a string quartet in the corner. Tables gleamed with plates of fine food he hadn't tasted in years, but all eyes were on the stage. A voice rang out through the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor 3 extraordinary young leaders, innovators, visionaries, builders of a new age. Please welcome the Howard siblings. The room erupted in applause. Ethan, Isabella, and Lucas walked onto the stage. Ethan in a sharp black suit, Lucas with a confident smile, Isabella in a gown that shimmered like starlight. They looked every bit the empire builders they were. Nathan's breath caught. He gripped the edge of a chair to steady himself. My children, he whispered. My children. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the annoyed glances. He had to get closer. He had to make them see him. On stage, Isabella spoke first, her voice strong and commanding. We stand here tonight, not as 3 individuals, but as a family. We built Howard Innovations with the values our mother taught us: perseverance, integrity, and the belief that no obstacle can silence true worth. The crowd cheered. Ethan stepped forward next, his tone calm but passionate. We were not born into wealth. We were not handed our future. We fought for it. And tonight, we honor not just our success, but the lessons that carried us here. Lucas took the microphone last, his smile warm but edged with fire. Some said we would never matter. Some called us curses. But tonight proves one thing. The world cannot ignore those who rise with truth and resilience. The applause shook the room. Nathan's ears burned. Those words, curses, they were his own. They were reminding the world of his betrayal without naming him. As the siblings stepped down from the stage, Nathan forced his way forward. His heart pounded as he finally stood before them. Ethan! Isabella! Lucas! His voice cracked. It's me, your father! The 3 froze. Gasps rippled through the crowd as heads turned. Cameras flashed. Isabella's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. Ethan's lips pressed into a hard line. Lucas shifted uneasily but said nothing. Nathan stretched out his hands, his voice desperate. I knew you'd succeed. I always believed in you. Stop. Isabella's voice was sharp, cutting him off. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare stand here and lie. The crowd hushed. All eyes locked on them. You once called us curses, she continued, her voice ringing through the hall. You left us in poverty. You mocked our mother. You abandoned your own blood for wealth and status. Nathan's face burned. I was young, foolish. I made mistakes. Ethan spoke next, his tone steady, controlled. Mistakes? You spat on us. You humiliated us. You told the world we would never matter. Lucas's voice followed, softer but firm. But we did matter. We always mattered. You just didn't see it. The crowd murmured. whispers spreading like fire. Nathan reached out again, tears brimming in his eyes. "Please, forgive me. I'm your father." Clara's voice rose from the side of the hall. She had been watching silently, her figure calm and dignified. Now she stepped forward, her presence commanding. "No, Nathan," she said firmly. "You are not their father. A father does not abandon. A father does not curse his own children. You forfeited that title the day you walked away." Gasps filled the room. Nathan turned pale. The siblings stood tall, their mother by their side. Isabella delivered the final blow, her words sharp and unforgettable. "You once told us we would beg on the streets while you dined with kings. Look around, Nathan. We are the ones feasting with kings tonight. And you—" She glanced at his worn suit, his trembling hands. "You are the one begging." The hall erupted in applause, not for Nathan, but for the Howard family. Nathan stumbled back, his chest tight, shame flooding every corner of his being. Cameras flashed, capturing his downfall for the world to see. As the music swelled and the siblings embraced their mother, Nathan slipped out of the hall, his figure small, broken, and forgotten. But outside, in the cold night air, he whispered to himself, "It's not over. It can't be over." The night air outside the gala was cool, sharp with the scent of rain on the horizon. Inside, the Howard siblings were still being celebrated, cameras flashing, voices praising, applause ringing in their ears. But Nathan was not finished. His pride, battered though it was, still clung to hope. He waited. In the shadow of the marble staircase, watching as Ethan, Isabella, and Lucas stepped out into the grand corridor with Clara close behind. Their laughter, warm, proud, united, cut through him like a blade. Once those voices had belonged to children who cried for his comfort, children he had left behind. Now they belonged to billionaires who commanded the attention of the world. He straightened his suit, forcing his trembling hands into fists. "This is my chance. I can fix this. They'll listen if I play it right." When the siblings moved toward the exit, Nathan pushed himself forward, his voice eager, false cheer dripping from every word. "My children," he cried. "My brilliant children." The hall went quiet. Heads turned. Reporters lifted their cameras. The siblings stopped, their smiles fading into cold stares. Clara stepped closer to them, her presence steady as stone. Nathan forced a smile, stretching his arms wide as though to embrace them. "I always believed in you," he said loudly, so the crowd could hear. "From the very beginning, I knew you were destined for greatness. Look at you now. Everything I dreamed for you has come true." Ethan's jaw tightened. Lucas's hands curled into fists. Isabella's eyes burned with fury. "You always believed in us?" Isabella's voice rang sharp, slicing the silence. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Is that what you're saying now?" "Yes," Nathan insisted, nodding quickly, desperate. "Of course." "You don't understand. I had to step away, but I always knew you'd rise. I sacrificed everything so you could shine." "Stop lying." Ethan's voice cut in, calm but deadly. "We remember." Every word Lucas's voice joined, trembling but firm. "You called us curses. You left us to starve. You said we would drag you down." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters scribbled faster, microphones angled closer. Nathan's smile faltered. He glanced around nervously, then leaned toward the siblings, lowering his voice. "Together we can stand as a family again." "No." Isabella's voice snapped like a whip. She stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "You once called us curses. Today we are the blessings the world cannot ignore. And you—" She pointed at him, her finger shaking with controlled rage. "You are the man who threw away his blessings for greed." The audience erupted with shocked murmurs. Before Nathan could respond, another figure entered the hall. The sound of heels clicking against marble silenced the room again. Victoria. She wore a glittering gown, but it did little to hide the desperation in her eyes. Her wealth was gone, but she had painted herself in jewels she could barely afford, clinging to the illusion of power. "Well, well," she said smoothly, though her smile was brittle. "The Howard siblings. What a triumph you've made." She moved closer, ignoring Nathan's startled glance. "I always knew you three had potential, and now perhaps we can work together." Reporters leaned in, hungry for the drama. Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Work together?" Victoria nodded quickly. "Yes, business partnerships, opportunities. You have the empire, I have connections." "Connections?" Ethan interrupted, his voice like ice. "You mean the same connections you used to mock our mother? The same ones you used to drive her deeper into poverty while you sat in luxury?" Victoria stiffened, her painted smile faltering. "That was a misunderstanding." Lucas's voice came next, quiet but strong. "You laughed at us in the streets. You called us pitiful. And now you stand here pretending you cared all along." The crowd gasped again. Victoria's eyes darted, searching for escape. I was foolish. But we are all wiser now. Surely we can put the past behind us." "No." Isabella's voice thundered across the hall. "The world will know exactly who you and Nathan are. Users, betrayers, cowards who preyed on the weak and abandoned their own." Reporters shouted questions, flashes blinding the stage. Nathan panicked. "No, that's not true. I loved them. I love them still." He reached toward Clara, toward the children he had rejected. "Clara, tell them I can change. I can—" Clara raised her hand, silencing him. Her eyes were sharp, her voice steady. "The empire you mocked us for building is ours alone," she said. "You forfeited your place the day you walked away, Nathan. And you, Victoria, you thought your wealth made you untouchable. But tonight, the world sees the truth. You built nothing. You destroyed. We, the ones you despised, are the builders." The hall shook with applause, the sound like thunder rolling across marble. Reporters swarmed closer, cameras capturing every word, every expression. Nathan stood frozen, his face pale, his body trembling. Victoria slipped away quietly, her jeweled gown trailing like a tattered lie. Clara and her children turned, their heads held high, walking past Nathan as if he were nothing more than a shadow. Outside, the rain had finally come. Nathan stumbled out of the gala, his suit soaked through, his hair plastered to his face. The crowd did not follow him. Their attention was on the family inside, the true victors. He stood alone on the steps, the cold water dripping down his cheeks, mingling with tears he refused to admit. He had once laughed at Clara in the rain, telling her she would beg on the streets. Now it was he who stood begging for forgiveness, for recognition, for a place that would never again be his. Inside, Clara and her children embraced, their bond unshaken, their triumph undeniable. "Never repay evil with evil," Clara whispered to them, her voice soft but strong. "Rise so high the world cannot deny your worth." They had done exactly that. Nathan, drenched and broken, stands outside in the rain, shut out of the golden doors of the gala. Behind him, the world moves on without him. Ahead, Clara and her children stride into the light, triumphant, untouchable. Betrayal may bring short-term gain. Pride may win applause for a season. But integrity, perseverance, and love build legacies that no wealth can buy, no lies can erase, and no betrayal can destroy.
The sound of Trevor's laughter cut through the ocean breeze like a blade. Olivia Thompson pressed herself against the side of the beach house, her heart pounding as she watched her ex-husband wrap his arms around his blonde assistant, Natalie Brooks. They were standing on the deck of what used to be their Malibu beach house, the one Trevor claimed in the divorce settlement just 3 weeks ago. "I can't believe she actually thought I loved her," Trevor said, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. 3 years of marriage and she never suspected a thing about us. Even when I started working those late nights with you." Natalie giggled, running her manicured fingers down his chest. "You're terrible, Trevor. But brilliant. Moving all those assets before filing for divorce? Genius. She signed those papers so fast, thinking she was escaping a bad marriage. She had no idea she was signing away millions. Olivia's legs felt weak. She'd come to collect the last of her personal items, things Trevor said she could pick up when he wasn't there. But here he was, celebrating her downfall with the woman who'd destroyed her marriage. The woman she'd trusted. The woman she'd even invited to dinner parties, thinking she was just a dedicated employee. The best part, Trevor continued, popping open a bottle of champagne that cost more than Olivia's monthly rent at her tiny apartment, is that she actually helped me build the business. All those nights she stayed up helping me with proposals, all those contacts she made for me through her marketing connections. She basically funded her own destruction. And now she's working 2 jobs just to pay for that sad little apartment, Natalie added. I saw her at the grocery store yesterday counting coupons. It was pathetic. They both laughed again, the sound echoing across the private beach where Olivia had once walked hand in hand with the man she thought she'd spend her life with. The man who'd promised to love and protect her. The man who'd been planning her financial ruin for months. Olivia backed away slowly, tears streaming down her face. She'd known Trevor had been distant the last year of their marriage. She'd known something was wrong when he started working late every night. But she trusted him when he said it was just business pressure. She'd believed him when he said Natalie was just helping him close important deals. She'd been such a fool. As she reached her old Honda, a far cry from the luxury cars parked in Trevor's driveway, Olivia heard Natalie's voice again. What should we do with all her old jewelry? The stuff she left behind. Throw it away, Trevor replied carelessly. It's all cheap stuff anyway. Not like the real diamonds I'm buying you now. Olivia sat in her car for a long moment, watching the couple through the large windows of the house. They were toasting with champagne, planning trips to Europe, talking about the wedding they'd have on this very beach. All of it funded by the business Olivia had helped build, the assets she'd unknowingly helped him hide, the life she'd foolishly trusted him with. She'd lost everything. Her marriage, her home, her financial security, her self-respect. Trevor had played her perfectly, and now he was laughing about it with his mistress. But as Olivia drove away from Malibu that night, something changed inside her. The crushing sadness that had consumed her for weeks began to transform into something else. Something harder. Something more determined. She'd been naive once. She'd trusted blindly. She'd signed papers without reading them carefully because she'd been too heartbroken to think straight. She wouldn't make those mistakes again. The next morning, Olivia woke up in her studio apartment with a new resolve. She made coffee in her cheap coffee maker and sat at her small kitchen table with a notebook. She began writing down everything she remembered about Trevor's business dealings. Every conversation they'd had about money. Every time he'd asked her to sign something. Every late-night phone call with clients whose names she remembered. She might not have money anymore, but she still had her brain. She still had her memory. And she still had something Trevor didn't know about, connections from her old marketing job that could help her understand exactly what he'd done to her. Trevor thought he'd won. He thought he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. He was out there celebrating, flaunting his new life, showing off his mistress and his stolen wealth. But Olivia Thompson wasn't the broken woman he thought he'd left behind. She was angry. She was determined. And she was going to find a way to make him pay for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of humiliation he'd put her through. She didn't know how yet. But she would figure it out. She had to. Because somewhere deep inside her, she knew this story wasn't over. Trevor's laughter that night at Malibu would come back to haunt him. She would make sure of it. The game was just beginning. 2 months after the beach house revelation, Olivia found herself reliving her marriage in a way she never had before. Sitting in her small apartment after her shift at the coffee shop, she spread out old photos and documents, trying to piece together the timeline of Trevor's deception. She remembered their wedding day 3 years ago. Trevor had been so charming, so attentive. They'd met when her marketing firm was hired to promote his real estate developments. He'd pursued her relentlessly, sending flowers to her office, taking her to expensive restaurants, making her feel like the most important person in his world. "You're brilliant, Olivia," he'd told her on their 3rd date. "Your ideas could help me expand my business in ways I never imagined." She'd been flattered. At 29, she was already successful in her marketing career, but Trevor made her feel like she could conquer the world. He'd convinced her to leave her job 6 months after their wedding, promising her a partnership in his real estate company. "We'll build an empire together," he'd said. "Harrison Properties will become the biggest name on the West Coast." Looking back now, Olivia could see how calculated it all was. Trevor had needed her connections in the business world. Her previous clients included major developers, city planners, and wealthy investors. Her reputation opened doors that his family name alone couldn't. She remembered the late nights they'd spent together in his home office, her developing marketing strategies while he worked on financial projections. She'd introduced him to Michael Chen from Pacific Investment Group, who became his biggest client. She'd connected him with Susan Rodriguez at City Planning, which led to 3 major development approvals. "I don't know what I'd do without you," Trevor had said after she'd helped him secure a $15 million deal. "You're my secret weapon." But somewhere around their second year of marriage, things started to change. Trevor hired Natalie as his assistant, claiming he needed someone to handle his schedule and correspondence while he focused on bigger deals. Natalie was young, blonde, and eager to please. She had a business degree but no real experience. "She's cheap labor," Trevor explained when Olivia questioned why he needed a full-time assistant. "And she's willing to work the long hours this business requires." The late nights became more frequent. Trevor would come home after midnight, claiming he and Natalie were working on proposals for potential clients. When Olivia offered to help, he'd brush her off. "You don't understand the technical aspects," he'd say. "Natalie has been studying real estate law. She's better suited for this kind of detail work." Olivia had felt hurt but tried to be understanding. She focused on other ways to support their life together. She managed their personal finances, maintained their social connections, and continued to introduce Trevor to valuable contacts whenever possible. She remembered the night she met Patricia Williams, a wealthy investor looking to fund residential developments. Olivia had connected them at a charity gala, and Patricia ended up investing $8 million in Trevor's newest project. Trevor had kissed Olivia that night, telling her she was amazing. But even then she'd noticed changes. Trevor seemed distracted during their conversations. He'd get text messages at all hours and claim they were from contractors or city officials. He'd become secretive about his phone, always placing it face down during dinner. "Is everything okay?" Olivia had asked one evening when Trevor seemed particularly distant. "Just business pressure," he'd replied. "This industry is more complicated than you understand. Natalie helps me navigate the details so I don't have to worry you with all of it." Olivia had accepted his explanation because she loved him. She trusted him. She believed they were building a life together. Now she realized that Trevor had been building something but not with her. He'd been building a relationship with Natalie while systematically removing Olivia from important business decisions. She remembered how he'd started handling their joint bank accounts alone, claiming it was more efficient. How he'd asked her to sign various legal documents, saying they were just routine business incorporations. "I don't want you to worry about the boring legal stuff," he'd said. "Just sign here so we can protect our assets properly." She'd signed everything he put in front of her. Partnership agreements, loan documents, asset transfers. She trusted him completely, never imagining that each signature was removing her from ownership of the business she'd helped build. The cruelest part was how normal he'd seemed. Even while planning her destruction, Trevor had continued to kiss her goodbye each morning, bring her coffee in bed on weekends, and tell her he loved her. He'd made love to her while carrying on an affair with Natalie. He'd celebrated their second anniversary with an expensive dinner while secretly moving their money into accounts she couldn't access. Olivia closed the photo album and wiped tears from her eyes. She'd spent 3 years being the perfect wife to a man who was actively plotting against her. She'd given him her heart, her career, her trust, and her financial security. And he'd used it all to build a life with someone else. But now she understood the scope of his betrayal. She knew exactly how he'd manipulated her, exactly which of her connections had made him wealthy, exactly how many lies he'd told to pull it off. And that knowledge was going to be his downfall. Tomorrow she would start making phone calls. She would reach out to the people she'd connected with Trevor, the clients she'd helped him secure, the officials she'd introduced him to. She would find out exactly what Trevor Harrison had built with her help. And then she would figure out how to tear it all down. The law offices of Morrison, Klein and Associates smelled like leather and old money. Olivia sat across from her lawyer, Jerome Morrison, watching him flip through the divorce papers Trevor's legal team had filed. His expression grew more concerned with each page. "Olivia, I have to be honest with you," Morrison said, removing his glasses and rubbing his tired eyes. "This is worse than I initially thought." It was 6 weeks after she'd discovered Trevor and Natalie at the beach house. 6 weeks of sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, and slowly understanding just how thoroughly she'd been played. "How bad?" Olivia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Your husband's attorneys have structured this very carefully. According to these documents, you signed a post-nuptial agreement 18 months ago that severely limits your claim to marital assets. Do you remember signing this? Morrison slid a thick document across the desk. Olivia stared at it, her stomach sinking as she recognized her own signature at the bottom. She remembered that day clearly now. Trevor had come home excited about a new investment opportunity that required some routine paperwork. He told me it was just business incorporation documents, Olivia said quietly. He said I needed to sign as his spouse to protect our assets from potential lawsuits. What you actually signed was an agreement stating that all business assets acquired during the marriage would remain separate property. You essentially waived your rights to community property claims on Harrison properties and all related assets. Olivia felt like she was going to be sick. But I helped build that business. I introduced him to most of his major clients. I gave up my own career to support his. I believe you, but legally this document makes it very difficult to prove your contributions were meant to establish joint ownership. And there's more. Morrison flipped to another section. According to this filing, your husband claims you were unfaithful during the marriage. He's citing that as grounds for divorce and additional reason to limit spousal support. That's a lie. Olivia stood up so quickly her chair nearly fell over. I never cheated on Trevor. Ever. I barely had time for friends, let alone another relationship. He's not providing evidence of the infidelity, which is unusual. Most attorneys wouldn't include that claim without proof. But he doesn't need to prove it to file it. The accusation alone affects the settlement negotiations. Olivia paced to the window overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Below, people walked purposefully to their jobs, their lives, their futures. She felt completely disconnected from that world of forward motion. What about the house? Our cars? The joint accounts. The Malibu house was purchased through Harrison Properties, so it's considered business property under your post-nuptial agreement. The main residence in Beverly Hills is mortgaged to the business as collateral for various loans. Your husband's financial statements show significant business debt, which reduces the value of marital assets. Debt? That's impossible. Trevor's business was thriving. He just closed a $20 million development deal last month. Morrison looked uncomfortable. According to these filings, Harrison Properties owes substantial money to various creditors and investors. After settling business debts, the available marital assets are valued at less than $200,000. Olivia laughed bitterly. $200,000? Trevor spent more than that on Natalie's jewelry last year. I saw the receipts. Who is Natalie? His assistant. His mistress. The woman he's been having an affair with for at least 2 years while I was supposedly the unfaithful one. Morrison made notes on his legal pad. If you can prove he was having an extramarital affair while accusing you of infidelity, that could help our case. But I have to warn you, gathering that evidence will take time, and time is something we don't have much of. What do you mean? Your husband's attorneys are pushing for a quick settlement. They want this finalized within 30 days. They're offering you $50,000 spousal support for 6 months and your personal belongings. If you don't accept, they'll proceed to trial, which could take years and cost more than you'd potentially recover. $50,000. For 3 years of marriage, for giving up her career, for helping build a multi-million-dollar business. For being made a fool of while her husband stole her life and gave it to another woman. I can't afford years of legal battles, Olivia admitted. I'm barely covering my rent working 2 part-time jobs. I understand. And I have to tell you, fighting this will be expensive. My retainer alone would be $25,000. Trevor's legal team is Morrison, Walsh and Partners. They're the most expensive divorce attorneys in the city. They'll drag this out and bleed you dry. Olivia stared out the window again. She felt trapped, cornered, defeated before the battle had even begun. Trevor had planned this perfectly. He'd isolated her financially, legally protected his assets, and positioned himself as the wronged party. He'd even chosen the timing, filing for divorce right after his biggest business deals had closed but before she could understand what was happening. There's one more thing, Morrison said gently. The settlement offer expires tomorrow. If you don't sign by 5 p.m., they withdraw the offer and we proceed to trial with no guaranteed outcome. 24 hours to decide whether to accept financial ruin or gamble on an expensive legal battle she probably couldn't win. That night, Olivia sat in her tiny apartment with the divorce papers spread across her kitchen table. She read every word, understanding for the first time how completely she'd been outsmarted. Trevor hadn't just planned to leave her, he'd planned to destroy her. The next morning she walked into Morrison's office and signed the papers. $50,000, 6 months of minimal spousal support, and her personal belongings. She watched Morrison fax the signed documents to Trevor's attorneys, officially ending her marriage and her financial security. As she left the law office, Olivia felt like she was walking through fog. 3 years of love, trust, and partnership had been reduced to a few pages of legal documents. Trevor had won completely. But as she drove away, one thought kept echoing in her mind. Morrison had said Trevor claimed she was unfaithful without providing evidence. He'd filed false accusations to justify his betrayal. He'd lied to the court just as easily as he'd lied to her. Men who lie that easily usually have other secrets. And Olivia was going to find them. 3 months after signing the divorce papers, Olivia's life had settled into a rhythm of quiet desperation. She worked mornings at Sunrise Coffee, a small cafe near her apartment, and afternoons at Henderson Marketing, doing freelance social media management for their overflow clients. The combined income barely covered her rent and basic expenses, but it kept her afloat while she figured out her next move. She'd learned to avoid certain parts of Los Angeles where she might run into Trevor or their former mutual friends. She deleted all her social media accounts to avoid seeing updates about his new life. She was trying to heal, trying to move forward. But Trevor wasn't going to let her heal quietly. It started with the photographs in Los Angeles magazine. "Local real estate mogul finds love again," was the headline, accompanied by glossy photos of Trevor and Natalie at various high-profile events around the city. The article described Trevor as a newly single entrepreneur who was ready for a fresh start with the woman who helped him build his empire. Olivia's co-worker Beth had brought the magazine to work, not knowing about Olivia's connection to the story. "Can you believe this guy?" Beth said, flipping through the article. "Listen to this quote. Natalie has been my rock through a difficult divorce. She helped me realize that some people marry you for your money, while others love you for who you truly are." Olivia felt physically ill reading it. Trevor was rewriting history, making himself the victim and Natalie the hero. According to the article, they'd fallen in love while working closely together on major development projects, with no mention that they'd been having an affair during his marriage. But the magazine article was just the beginning. The next week, Olivia was picking up groceries when she overheard 2 women talking in the checkout line. "Did you see the engagement party photos? They rented out the entire Malibu club for the weekend. Trevor Harrison really knows how to celebrate. I heard he flew her family in from Denver on a private jet." Olivia abandoned her cart and left the store. She drove straight to Malibu, telling herself she wasn't going to spy on them, just needing to see the ocean. But she found herself parked across from the Malibu club, watching luxury cars arrive for Trevor and Natalie's engagement celebration. She recognized many of the guests' former clients, business associates, people she'd introduced to Trevor during their marriage. They were all there to celebrate his new beginning with the woman he'd been cheating with. Through the club's large windows, she could see Trevor in an expensive tuxedo, his arm around Natalie in a designer gown that probably cost more than Olivia made in 6 months. They were laughing, dancing, accepting congratulations from people who had no idea about the affair or the financial manipulation that had made this celebration possible. A photographer was documenting everything. These photos would probably end up in another magazine article about Trevor's fairy tale romance. Over the following months, the public displays became more frequent and more elaborate. Trevor and Natalie were photographed at movie premieres, charity galas, and exclusive restaurant openings. They took a 3-week vacation to Europe, posting photos from Paris, Rome, and Monaco. They bought matching his and hers Ferraris and were photographed driving them along the Pacific Coast Highway. The final straw came 6 months after the divorce, when Olivia was walking along Santa Monica Pier during her lunch break. She needed fresh air after a difficult morning dealing with demanding clients at the marketing agency. She heard Trevor's distinctive laugh before she saw him. There he was, just 50 feet away with Natalie and a film crew. They were being interviewed for some local lifestyle show, standing in front of their new yacht. "This is our latest investment," Trevor was saying to the reporter. "The second chance, named for the beautiful second chance at love that Natalie has given me." The reporter, a young woman with perfectly styled hair, nodded enthusiastically. "You two seem so happy. What's the secret to your relationship?" Natalie giggled and looked adoringly at Trevor. "Honesty. Complete honesty about everything. We don't have any secrets from each other." Olivia nearly choked on her coffee. The two people who had built their relationship on lies were talking about honesty on television. "My first marriage taught me the importance of finding someone who shares your values," Trevor continued. "Someone who supports your dreams instead of just wanting to spend your money." The camera panned to show the yacht's name painted in elegant script across the stern, Second Chance. Below it, in smaller letters, was its home port, Malibu, California. Olivia watched them pose for glamour shots on the deck, Trevor in designer swim shorts and Natalie in a bikini that cost more than Olivia's monthly grocery budget. They looked like they were living in a magazine spread, surrounded by luxury that had been built on the foundation of her destroyed life. As the interview concluded, she heard the reporter ask about their wedding plans. "We're thinking of a destination wedding," Natalie said. "Maybe the French Riviera." Trevor says money is no object when it comes to our special day. Money was no object because it wasn't really Trevor's money. It was money from the business Olivia had helped build, money from clients she'd introduced him to, money from opportunities she'd created for him. That night, Olivia sat in her small apartment, eating a dinner of ramen noodles while Trevor and Natalie were probably dining at some five-star restaurant. The contrast was crushing. While she counted every dollar, clipped coupons, and wore the same clothes she'd owned for years, they were literally sailing into the sunset on their yacht. Trevor wasn't just enjoying his stolen wealth, he was flaunting it. Every public appearance, every magazine article, every social media post was a reminder that he'd won and she'd lost. He was making sure everyone knew how successful and happy he was with his new life. But there was something almost desperate about all the public displays. Something that suggested Trevor wasn't just celebrating, he was trying to convince the world and maybe himself that his story was true. That he was the victim who'd found true love, not the cheater who'd destroyed his wife to steal her contributions to his success. People who were truly happy didn't usually need to prove it so publicly. Olivia was beginning to understand that Trevor's constant need to show off might be his biggest weakness. The more attention he drew to himself, the more people would scrutinize his story. And eventually, someone might start asking questions about how a man who claimed his ex-wife was a gold digger had managed to build such wealth during their marriage. The truth had a way of surfacing when people looked too closely. 8 months after the divorce, Olivia had fallen into a routine that kept her sane if not happy. Coffee shop mornings, marketing work afternoons, quiet evenings in her small apartment. She'd learned to avoid the entertainment news that constantly featured Trevor and Natalie's glamorous life. She'd stopped driving past their old haunts. She was trying to build something new from the ruins of her old life. Then Robert Kane knocked on her door. It was a Tuesday evening in late November. Olivia had just finished heating up leftover soup for dinner when she heard the knock. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her few friends usually called first. Through the peephole, she saw a distinguished older man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase. "Miss Thompson? My name is Robert Kane. I'm an attorney representing the Harrison estate. I need to speak with you about a very important matter." Olivia's first instinct was to not open the door. Anything connected to the Harrison name meant trouble for her. But something in the man's tone suggested this wasn't about the divorce or some new legal attack from Trevor. "What kind of matter?" she asked through the door. "It concerns the recent death of Mr. Harrison Sr. and his will. I believe you'll want to hear what I have to say." Trevor's father had died? Olivia hadn't heard anything about it, but then again she'd been avoiding all news about the Harrison family. She opened the door but left the chain latch engaged. "May I see some identification?" Kane smiled approvingly and handed her a business card through the gap. "Robert Kane, Senior Partner, Kane & Associates, Estate Planning and Probate Law." The address was in Beverly Hills. "I understand your caution, Miss Thompson. Your ex-husband has not made this easy for you. But I assure you, I'm here with information that could change your circumstances considerably." Olivia studied his face. Kane appeared to be in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Something about his manner suggested integrity, though she'd learned not to trust her instincts about men in expensive suits. "Trevor's father died?" she asked. 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. The funeral was private, family only. I've been trying to locate you ever since." "Why?" "Because you're mentioned in his will." That got Olivia's attention. She'd met Harrison Sr. only a few times during her marriage. He'd been polite but distant, never seeming particularly fond of her or particularly interested in Trevor's personal life. Why would she be mentioned in his will? She removed the chain latch and opened the door fully. "I suppose you should come in." Kane entered her small apartment, and Olivia felt embarrassed by the contrast between his obvious wealth and her modest circumstances. He didn't seem to notice or judge, simply taking a seat at her small kitchen table when she offered. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you." As Olivia prepared coffee with her cheap coffee maker, Kane opened his briefcase and removed several documents. She noticed his hands were steady, his movements precise. This was a man accustomed to handling important matters. Miss Thompson, what I'm about to tell you may come as quite a shock. Harold Harrison Sr. was a very wealthy man. His estate is valued at approximately $52 million, including real estate holdings, investments, and a controlling interest in Harrison Properties. I'm sure Trevor is very happy about his inheritance, Olivia said, setting a coffee mug in front of Kane. But I don't understand what this has to do with me. Kane took a sip of coffee and regarded her carefully. That's just it. Trevor isn't inheriting everything. In fact, he may not be inheriting anything at all. Olivia sat down across from him. I don't understand. Harold Harrison changed his will 6 months before his death. He was very concerned about Trevor's character, particularly regarding his treatment of you during your marriage. He knew about the affair? He knew about many things. Harold had been having Trevor investigated by a private investigator for over a year. He was aware of the relationship with Ms. Brooks, the financial manipulation during your divorce, and several other questionable business practices. Olivia's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. He had Trevor investigated? Harold was old-fashioned about marriage and family loyalty. When he heard rumors about Trevor's behavior, he decided to learn the truth. What he discovered disgusted him. Kane opened one of the folders and removed a thick document. This is Harold's final will and testament, executed 4 months ago. It contains what's known as a character clause. What's a character clause? It's a provision that makes inheritance conditional upon meeting certain moral standards. In this case, Harold specified that if Trevor divorced his wife due to his own marital misconduct, or if he was found to have committed financial fraud against family members, his inheritance would be voided. Olivia stared at Kane, not quite believing what she was hearing. And if Trevor's inheritance is voided? Then according to the will, his share of the estate passes to the wronged party who suffered financial harm due to Trevor's actions. Harold specifically names you, Olivia Thompson, as that person. The apartment went completely quiet except for the ticking of Olivia's small clock on the wall. She felt like the world had suddenly tilted off its axis. $52 million? She whispered. Plus controlling interest in Harrison Properties, which as you know, has grown substantially during your marriage to Trevor. Harold believed your contributions to the business were never properly recognized or compensated. Olivia stood up and walked to her small window, looking out at the parking lot of her modest apartment complex. 8 months ago she'd been living in a Beverly Hills mansion. Now she was counting pennies and working 2 jobs. The idea that she might inherit $52 million seemed impossible. But Trevor doesn't know about this? Not yet. The will reading is scheduled for next week. Harold insisted that you be located and informed first, so you could have legal representation present. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you supposed to be working for the estate? Kane smiled. Harold hired me specifically to handle this situation. He was quite explicit in his instructions. He wanted to ensure that if Trevor had indeed betrayed his marriage and manipulated you financially, you would have the resources to rebuild your life. Olivia turned back to face Kane. What happens next? Next week, Trevor will expect to inherit his father's fortune. Instead, he'll discover that his actions have cost him everything. The question is whether we can prove those actions sufficiently to satisfy the legal requirements of the will. What do we need to prove? Kane smiled and opened another folder. That's where you come in, Miss Thompson. You know better than anyone what Trevor did to you. And you may know more about his business dealings than you realize. With your help, we can document everything he did wrong. Every lie, every act of financial manipulation, every breach of marital trust. For the first time in months, Olivia felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. When do we start? She asked. The law offices of Kane and Associates occupied an entire floor of a Beverly Hills high-rise. As Olivia walked through the elegant reception area the next morning, she felt like she was entering a different world. Just 24 hours ago, she'd been heating up canned soup for dinner. Now she was potentially about to inherit $52 million. Robert Kane met her in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The morning sun streamed across a polished mahogany table covered with legal documents, photographs, and file folders. I've spent the night reviewing everything Harold's investigators gathered about Trevor's activities, Kane said, gesturing for Olivia to sit. The evidence is even more extensive than I initially thought. Kane opened the first folder, revealing surveillance photographs of Trevor and Natalie at various locations: restaurants, hotels, her apartment building. The timestamps showed dates going back over 2 years, well into Olivia's marriage. Harold's investigator documented their relationship extensively. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, even photographs of jewelry purchases that Trevor gave to Ms. Brooks while still married to you. Olivia studied the photos. There was Trevor kissing Natalie outside an expensive restaurant on Melrose. Trevor and Natalie checking into the Beverly Hills Hotel. Trevor presenting Natalie with a jewelry box outside Tiffany & Company. All of it happening while Olivia was home alone, believing her husband was working late. This proves the affair, she said quietly. It proves much more than that. Kane opened another folder. Harold's investigator also traced Trevor's financial movements during the last 18 months of your marriage. Look at this. Kane spread out bank statements and financial records. Even without her accounting background, Olivia could see the pattern immediately. Large sums moving out of joint accounts into business accounts. Assets being transferred from Harrison Properties into subsidiary companies with different names. Money flowing into investment accounts that she'd never known existed. He was hiding assets, Olivia said. Systematically. Beginning approximately 6 months before he asked for the divorce. Trevor created a complex web of business entities designed to make his wealth appear to belong to his companies rather than being marital property. Kane showed her more documents. Here's the really damning evidence. Trevor used your business connections to secure these deals, then moved the profits into accounts you couldn't access. Remember Patricia Williams, the investor you introduced him to at that charity gala? Of course. She invested $8 million in his Westwood development. Trevor moved all the profits from that project into a subsidiary company called Pacific Holdings. According to the divorce filing, Pacific Holdings was a separate business entity with no connection to marital assets. But look at who's listed as the sole owner. Olivia read the incorporation documents Kane handed her. Trevor Harrison, doing business as Pacific Holdings. She looked up at Kane. He created fake companies to hide money from the divorce? Multiple companies. At least 6 different entities, all used to shelter income and assets that should have been considered marital property. If your divorce attorney had known about these accounts, your settlement would have been in the millions, not thousands. Olivia felt anger burning in her chest. My attorney said Trevor's business had debts. He said there weren't enough assets to divide. Trevor showed debts on paper by having Harrison Properties owe money to his subsidiary companies. On paper, his main business was broke. In reality, he was moving all the real money to accounts you couldn't touch. Kane continued pulling documents from the files. But here's what Trevor didn't know. His father was watching everything. Harold had been suspicious of Trevor's character for years, but when he heard rumors about marital problems, he hired investigators to monitor the situation. Why did he care so much about my marriage? Kane smiled. Harold liked you, Olivia. He told me you were the first woman Trevor brought home who seemed to have her own accomplishments and integrity. He was impressed by your marketing career and your business sense. When Trevor announced he was filing for divorce and claiming you were unfaithful, Harold knew something was wrong. So he investigated? Thoroughly. Harold spent over $200,000 on private investigators, forensic accountants, and legal research. He wanted to know exactly what kind of man his son had become. Kane opened the largest folder, revealing Harold's final will and testament. The document was thick, filled with legal language and conditions. Harold was devastated by what the investigation revealed. Trevor wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was stealing from her. Using her connections to build wealth, then hiding that wealth to avoid sharing it. Harold considered this a profound moral failure. Kane flipped to a specific section of the will. Here's the character clause. I'll read it exactly as Harold wrote it. Kane cleared his throat and began reading. If my son, Trevor James Harrison, is found to have terminated his marriage to Olivia Marie Thompson through his own adultery, deception, or financial misconduct, then he shall be deemed unworthy of the Harrison family legacy. In such circumstances, his inheritance shall be voided entirely, and all assets designated for him shall instead pass to the party wronged by his actions. The party wronged by his actions, Olivia repeated. That's you. Harold specifically identified you as the injured party. He believed Trevor stole not just your marriage, but your rightful share of the wealth you helped him create. Kane turned to another section of the will. Harold also included a provision for immediate asset recovery. If Trevor is found to have hidden marital assets during your divorce, those assets must be recovered and added to your inheritance. Olivia leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed. So if we can prove what Trevor did, You'll inherit Harold's $52 million estate, plus recover all the hidden assets Trevor stole from your marriage. We estimate the total value could exceed $70 million. $70 million. The number seemed impossible. Yesterday she'd been worried about paying her electric bill. What do we need to do to prove this? Kane began organizing the documents into neat stacks. The will reading is in 5 days. Trevor will attend expecting to inherit everything. Instead, we'll present this evidence and invoke the character clause. But we need your testimony about Trevor's deception during the marriage, and we need to document how your contributions helped build his wealth. I can do that. I kept records of everything, the clients I introduced him to, the business connections I made, the marketing strategies I developed for his company. Perfect. Harold believed you were the real architect of Trevor's recent success. Now we can prove it legally. Kane stood and walked to the windows overlooking Beverly Hills. There's one more thing you should know, Olivia. Harold felt terrible about what happened to you. He tried to intervene during your divorce, but Trevor refused to listen to him. Harold wanted to help you directly, but his attorneys advised against it while the divorce was pending. He wanted to help me? He respected you. He believed you deserved better than what Trevor gave you. This will is his way of ensuring you get justice even after his death. Olivia looked down at all the evidence spread across the table. Bank records, surveillance photos, business documents, legal filings. The complete documentation of Trevor's betrayal and her own contributions to his success. For 8 months she'd felt like the victim of the perfect crime. Trevor had stolen her life so skillfully that she'd had no recourse, no way to fight back, no hope of justice. But Harold Harrison had been watching. And he'd left her the weapon she needed to destroy the man who destroyed her. When Trevor walks into that will reading, she said quietly, he has no idea what's coming, does he? Kane smiled. None at all. He thinks he's about to become one of the richest men in Los Angeles. Instead, he's about to lose everything he stole from you. The revenge she dreamed about was finally within reach. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Kane had assigned a team of forensic accountants and legal researchers to build the case against Trevor, but he needed Olivia's personal knowledge to connect all the pieces. She found herself reliving her marriage in painful detail, but this time with a purpose. They met each morning in Kane's conference room, going through every aspect of Trevor's business dealings during their marriage. Olivia had kept meticulous records in her personal files, emails, business cards, notes from phone conversations, even photos from social events where she'd introduced Trevor to potential clients. This is incredible documentation, said Janet Wu, Kane's lead forensic accountant. Most people don't realize how much evidence they have of their own contributions to a business. Olivia had spread out 3 years' worth of materials across the conference table. Email chains showing how she'd connected Trevor with Michael Chen at Pacific Investment Group. Business cards from contacts she'd made at charity events and professional gatherings. Photos from dinner parties where she'd introduced Trevor to city planners, architects, and investors. I worked in marketing for 8 years before marrying Trevor, Olivia explained. I'm used to documenting relationships and tracking results. I just never thought I'd need to prove my own contributions to my husband's success. These email chains are particularly valuable, Janet said, highlighting sections of correspondence. Look at this exchange with Patricia Williams. You clearly arranged the initial meeting, provided her with Trevor's development plans, and followed up with additional information. Without your introduction, this $8 million deal never would have happened. Kane reviewed a stack of photographs from various business events. Harold's investigators documented Trevor's public statements about his success, and now we can show that most of his major deals came through your connections. The contrast between his claims and the reality is damning. But they still needed more concrete evidence of Trevor's financial manipulation. The hidden bank accounts and shell companies were clearly documented in Harold's investigation, but Kane wanted additional proof that could hold up under legal challenge. We need to get inside Trevor's current business records, Kane said. The evidence Harold's investigators gathered is excellent, but it's from external observation. If we could access Trevor's current financial statements, we could show exactly how much money he's hidden. How do we do that legally? Olivia asked. We don't need to do anything illegal, Kane replied with a slight smile. But we might need to be creative. That evening, Kane explained his plan. Trevor's business offices were in a high-rise building in Century City. Harrison Properties occupied the entire 15th floor, with Trevor's personal office overlooking the city. The building had standard security, but nothing that couldn't be managed with the right approach. I still have friends who work in that building, Olivia said. And I still have my key card from when I used to visit Trevor at work. Your key card still works? Trevor never canceled it. I think he forgot I had one, or maybe he was too arrogant to think I'd ever use it against him. Kane looked intrigued. Would you be willing to retrieve some documents from his office? What kind of documents? Current financial statements, bank account information, client contracts, anything that shows his real financial position. If we can prove he lied about his assets during your divorce, it strengthens the case under Harold's character clause. Olivia felt a thrill of fear and excitement. When? Tomorrow night. Trevor and Natalie are attending the Beverly Hills Film Festival premiere. I checked their social media, they're planning to be there until at least midnight. That gives us a window. The next evening, Olivia found herself driving toward Century City with her heart pounding. She'd changed into dark clothes and tied her hair back, feeling like she was in some kind of spy movie. Kane waited in his car in the parking garage while she took the elevator to the 15th floor. The Harrison Properties offices were dark and empty. Olivia's key card still worked, just as she'd hoped. She made her way through the familiar hallway to Trevor's corner office, using her phone's flashlight to navigate. Trevor's office looked exactly as she remembered: expensive furniture, awards on the walls, photos of his various development projects. But now there were also photos of him with Natalie, including some taken at locations Olivia recognized from their marriage. She went straight to Trevor's desk, looking for anything that might contain financial information. The desktop computer was password protected, but Trevor had always been careless about physical documents. She opened his desk drawers and began searching. In the bottom drawer, she found a file folder marked Personal Banking 2024. Inside were statements from 3 different accounts she'd never seen before. One account at Beverly Hills Bank showed a balance of over $2 million. Another account at Pacific Trust had regular deposits from various Harrison Properties subsidiaries. But the most damaging document was a handwritten note in Trevor's own writing. Remember to transfer Q3 profits to Cayman account before year-end. Don't want visible assets during divorce settlement. Olivia's hands shook as she photographed the note with her phone. This was direct evidence that Trevor had deliberately hidden assets during their divorce proceedings. She continued searching and found more incriminating documents. Client contracts showing fees much higher than what Trevor had reported to the court. Investment statements from offshore accounts. Even a letter from an accountant discussing strategies for minimizing visible assets during domestic proceedings. As she photographed each document, Olivia felt a mixture of vindication and rage. Here was proof of everything Kane had suspected. Trevor hadn't just been unfaithful, he'd committed deliberate fraud to steal from her during their divorce. She was so focused on the documents that she almost missed the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Panic shot through her body. Someone was in the building. She quickly stuffed the documents back into the file folder, but as she tried to close the desk drawer quietly, her hand slipped and she knocked over a glass paperweight. The sound seemed incredibly loud in the quiet office. Olivia froze, listening for more footsteps. After a few seconds of silence, she carefully closed the drawer and moved toward the office door. But as she reached for the door handle, she heard voices coming from the reception area. 2 people were talking quietly, moving toward the offices. One voice was male, authoritative. The other was female, familiar. Trevor and Natalie had come back early. Olivia looked around Trevor's office desperately. There was nowhere to hide except behind his desk, and if they turned on the lights, she'd be visible immediately. She could hear them getting closer, their voices becoming clearer. I just need to grab those contracts for the morning meeting, Trevor was saying. It'll only take a minute. Why didn't you bring them home earlier? Natalie complained. I wanted to go straight to the after party. Because I'm not psychic, Natalie. The client called an hour ago asking for changes. They were right outside Trevor's office now. Olivia crouched behind the desk, her heart beating so loudly she was sure they'd hear it. She still had her phone out, and she realized she hadn't finished photographing all the documents in the file folder. The office lights clicked on. Where did I put those contracts? Trevor muttered, walking around his desk. Olivia pressed herself against the floor behind the desk, praying he wouldn't look down. She could see his feet just inches away from where she was hiding. Trevor, hurry up, Natalie said from the doorway. People are already asking where we went. They're not in the usual spot, Trevor said, opening and closing desk drawers. I swear, sometimes I think someone's been in my office. Olivia's blood went cold. Was Trevor suspicious or just paranoid? Maybe your cleaning service moved them, Natalie suggested. Can't you just email the client and tell them you'll bring the contracts in the morning? No, this is a $20 million deal. I'm not taking any chances. Trevor continued searching, opening filing cabinets and moving papers around. Olivia remained frozen behind the desk, afraid to breathe. She still had the file folder with the banking documents in her hand, but she couldn't risk moving to put it back. Finally, Trevor found what he was looking for in a different filing cabinet. Got them. Let's get out of here. As they headed toward the door, Olivia heard Natalie say, "This place gives me the creeps at night. It feels like someone's watching us." Their voices faded as they walked back toward the elevators. Olivia waited until she heard the elevator doors close before moving. Her legs were cramped from crouching, and her hands were still shaking from adrenaline. She quickly put the banking file back where she'd found it, but as she closed the drawer, she realized she'd been gripping the papers so tightly that she'd torn one of them. There was also a small blood stain on the corner of one document where she'd broken her fingernail during the panicked search. Evidence of her presence. Trevor might notice it tomorrow, but there was nothing she could do about it now. She had the photos she needed, and that was what mattered. Olivia made her way back to the elevator, her heart still racing. As she rode down to the parking garage, she looked at the photos she'd taken on her phone. Crystal clear images of Trevor's financial fraud, his hidden assets, his own handwritten admission of deliberate deception. Tomorrow was the will reading. Tomorrow, Trevor would discover that his father had left him nothing. And now they had irrefutable proof of why he deserved nothing. The broken fingernail was a small price to pay for justice. The law offices of Kane and Associates had never felt more formal than they did on the morning of Harold Harrison's will reading. Olivia arrived 30 minutes early, wearing the best suit she owned, a simple black outfit she'd bought for job interviews months ago. It felt surreal to be sitting in the same conference room where she'd spent the past week building a case against her ex-husband. Kane greeted her with quiet confidence. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for 8 months," Olivia replied. Trevor arrived exactly on time, as if he were attending a business meeting rather than his father's will reading. He wore an expensive charcoal suit and Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly rent. Natalie accompanied him, dressed in a designer dress and jewelry that sparkled under the conference room lights. Neither of them acknowledged Olivia's presence, though Trevor did seem surprised to see her there. "Why is she here?" Trevor asked Kane directly, not bothering to address Olivia. "Miss Thompson is mentioned in your father's will," Kane replied professionally. "She has a right to be present." Trevor shrugged dismissively. "I suppose Dad left her something small. He always did feel sorry for people." Natalie squeezed Trevor's hand. "That's sweet of him. Maybe a piece of jewelry or something sentimental." Olivia remained silent, watching them settle into their chairs with the confidence of people who believed they were about to become very wealthy. Trevor had brought his own attorney, Richard Morrison, the same lawyer who had handled their divorce. Morrison looked as expensive and arrogant as ever. Kane began the proceedings with formal legal language, explaining the purpose of the meeting and the validity of Harold Harrison's final will and testament. Trevor listened with obvious impatience, clearly wanting to skip to the part about his inheritance. "The estate of Harold Harrison is valued at approximately $52 million, Kane announced, including real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and controlling interest in Harrison properties. Trevor smiled and reached for Natalie's hand. $52 million was even more than he'd expected. However, Kane continued, Mr. Harrison's will contain specific conditions that must be addressed before any distributions can be made. Trevor's smile faltered slightly. What kind of conditions? Kane opened the will to the relevant section. Your father included what's known as a character clause. I'll read it exactly as written. Kane's voice became formal and precise. I have learned disturbing information about my son Trevor's conduct during his marriage to Olivia Thompson. If investigation confirms that Trevor terminated his marriage through his own adultery, deception, or financial misconduct, then he has proven himself unworthy of the Harrison family legacy. The conference room went completely silent. Trevor's face had gone pale. Dad was investigating my marriage? Trevor asked, his voice tight. Extensively, Kane replied. He gestured to Janet Wu, who began placing documents on the conference table. Your father hired private investigators, forensic accountants, and legal researchers. He wanted to understand the truth about your divorce. Janet spread out the surveillance photos of Trevor and Natalie at various locations during his marriage to Olivia. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases. A complete documentation of their affair. This proves you were having an extramarital relationship with Ms. Brooks for over 2 years before filing for divorce, Kane stated. Trevor's attorney leaned forward. Extramarital relationships don't necessarily void inheritance rights. Many wealthy families deal with infidelity without disinheriting family members. You're correct, Kane agreed. But adultery is only one part of the character clause. The more serious issue is financial fraud. Kane nodded to Janet, who began displaying Trevor's banking records and business documents. The hidden accounts, the shell companies, the systematic transfer of assets before the divorce filing. Your father's investigation revealed that you engaged in deliberate financial misconduct to hide marital assets from your wife during divorce proceedings, Kane explained. You created false companies, moved money to offshore accounts, and lied to the court about your financial position. Trevor shot to his feet. That's not illegal. Asset protection is a standard business practice. Asset protection is legal, Kane agreed calmly. Fraud is not. And lying under oath during divorce proceedings is perjury. Kane placed Trevor's handwritten note on the table, the one about transferring profits to the Cayman account before the divorce settlement. Olivia watched Trevor's face as he recognized his own handwriting. Where did you get that? Trevor demanded. That's not important, Kane replied. What matters is that this note in your own handwriting proves you deliberately hid assets during your divorce. Natalie was staring at the documents spread across the table, her face growing pale as she began to understand what they meant. Your father was particularly disturbed by the evidence showing how you used Olivia's business connections to build your wealth, then systematically excluded her from the benefits of that wealth, Kane continued. He displayed Olivia's carefully documented evidence of her contributions to Harrison Properties. The email chains, the client contacts, the business relationships she created for Trevor. Miss Thompson introduced you to clients who generated over $30 million in revenue for Harrison Properties during your marriage. She essentially built your recent success. Yet you not only failed to share that success with her, you actively stole her rightful portion through fraud. Trevor's attorney was frantically taking notes, but even he looked concerned by the evidence being presented. Kane returned to reading from the will. If my son has indeed committed these acts of betrayal against his wife, then he has proven himself unworthy of inheriting the Harrison legacy. In such circumstances, his entire inheritance shall be voided, and all designated assets shall instead pass to the wronged party, Olivia Marie Thompson. The words hit Trevor like a physical blow. He stared at Kane, then at Olivia, then back at the will. You're giving her my inheritance? Trevor's voice cracked. Your father is giving her what should have been hers all along, Kane corrected. The wealth you stole from her during your marriage, plus compensation for the emotional and financial damage you caused. Natalie suddenly spoke up, her voice shaky. Trevor, what is he talking about? You told me Olivia was the one who cheated. You said she was trying to take your money unfairly. Trevor ignored her, focusing his anger on Kane. You can't prove any of this would hold up in court. I'll contest this will. I'll fight it for years if necessary. Kane smiled slightly. You're welcome to try. But your father anticipated that response. He opened another section of the will. Harold included an additional provision. If you contest this will on grounds that the character clause is invalid, the estate will fund Miss Thompson's legal defense indefinitely. You'll be fighting the entire Harrison fortune, not just her personal resources. Trevor slumped back into his chair, the reality finally sinking in. His father had outmaneuvered him completely. There's one more thing, Kane added, consulting his notes. The will also provides for immediate asset recovery. Any marital property that was hidden during Miss Thompson's divorce must be identified and returned to her, with interest. Janet Wu spoke up. Based on our preliminary investigation, we estimate Mr. Harrison hid approximately $18 million in assets during the divorce proceedings. Those funds will be recovered and added to Miss Thompson's inheritance. $70 million total, Kane concluded. The $52 million estate, plus recovery of the assets you stole from your wife. Olivia had remained silent throughout the entire proceeding, watching Trevor's world collapse around him. Now she finally spoke. You told that reporter that your first marriage taught you the importance of finding someone who shares your values, someone who supports your dreams instead of just wanting to spend your money. She looked directly at Trevor. I did support your dreams. I helped build everything you have. And you stole it from me. Trevor stared at her, his face a mixture of shock, anger, and something that might have been shame. Natalie suddenly stood up. I need to leave. I can't. She looked at Trevor with something close to disgust. You lied to me about everything. She walked out of the conference room without another word, leaving Trevor alone with the ruins of his life. Kane began organizing the documents. The estate will be transferred to Miss Thompson within 30 days, pending completion of asset recovery procedures. Mr. Harrison, you'll receive formal notice of all proceedings. Trevor's attorney gathered his papers. We'll be in touch about our response, he said, but even he sounded defeated. As Trevor left the conference room, he stopped at the door and looked back at Olivia. I hope you're happy, he said bitterly. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I'm not happy, Trevor. I'm just finally getting justice. After Trevor and his attorney left, Olivia sat alone with Kane in the quiet conference room. How does it feel? Kane asked. Olivia looked out the windows at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there, Trevor was probably calling business associates trying to figure out how to salvage his life. Somewhere out there, Natalie was probably packing her things and looking for a new wealthy boyfriend. It feels like the end of a very long, very painful chapter, Olivia said. And the beginning of something completely new. 3 months after the will reading, the transformation was complete. Trevor's world had collapsed with stunning speed, while Olivia's life had been rebuilt from the ground up. The asset recovery process had been swift and merciless. Kane's team of forensic accountants had traced every dollar Trevor had hidden during their marriage, and the courts had ordered immediate return of all funds plus penalties for fraud. The Cayman Islands account, the shell companies, the fake business debts, all of it unraveled under legal scrutiny. Trevor's attempts to contest the will had failed spectacularly. Harold's character clause was ironclad, and the evidence of Trevor's misconduct was overwhelming. 3 different judges had reviewed the case and reached the same conclusion. Trevor had forfeited his inheritance through his own actions. Olivia now owned a controlling interest in Harrison Properties, along with Harold's real estate portfolio and investment accounts. The total value had actually grown to $75 million by the time all assets were recovered and transferred. But the money wasn't the most satisfying part of her revenge. The most satisfying part was watching Trevor's public humiliation unfold. The story broke first in the Los Angeles Times. Real estate mogul loses fortune due to adultery and fraud. The article detailed how Trevor Harrison had been disinherited for cheating on his wife and stealing marital assets. Within hours, the story was picked up by entertainment news shows, business magazines, and social media. The same reporters who had celebrated Trevor and Natalie's fairy tale romance now dissected every lie they had told. The yacht named Second Chance was revealed to have been purchased with money stolen from Trevor's ex-wife. The European vacation photos became evidence of how he'd spent his ill-gotten gains. The engagement party at the Malibu Club looked pathetic in hindsight, a celebration funded by fraud. Natalie had abandoned Trevor within days of the will reading. She'd moved out of their shared penthouse, returned the engagement ring, and quickly found herself a new wealthy boyfriend, a tech entrepreneur who actually owned his own money. Tabloid newspapers gleefully reported her statement. I thought I was dating a successful businessman. Instead, I was dating a con artist who stole everything from his ex-wife. Trevor's business empire crumbled as clients learned the truth about his character. Major investors pulled out of development deals. The city of Los Angeles canceled several contracts citing ethical concerns. Banks called in loans when they discovered Trevor no longer had assets to secure his debts. Within 2 months, Trevor had been forced to sell his remaining properties to pay creditors. The Beverly Hills mansion went to auction. The matching Ferraris were repossessed. Even his expensive watch collection was sold to cover legal fees. The final humiliation came when Trevor was forced to take a job working for one of his former competitors, not as an executive, but as a junior sales associate. The man who had once commanded $20 million deals was now showing starter homes to first-time buyers for a small commission. Olivia learned about Trevor's employment situation from Beth, her former co-worker at the coffee shop. You'll never guess who came into Sunrise Coffee yesterday, Beth said during one of their weekly lunch meetings. Trevor Harrison. He was wearing a cheap suit and asking if we were hiring part-time help. Did you recognize him? Not at first. He looks terrible, like he's aged 10 years in the past few months. But then I realized it was the guy from all those magazine articles about losing his inheritance. The manager didn't hire him, by the way. She said she couldn't trust someone with his reputation around the cash register. Olivia felt a mixture of satisfaction and pity. She'd wanted Trevor to face consequences for his actions, but seeing him reduced to begging for minimum wage jobs was almost too complete. Almost. The real justice wasn't in Trevor's suffering, it was in what Olivia had built with her recovered wealth. She'd used part of her inheritance to establish the Harrison Foundation for Financial Justice, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse in divorce proceedings. The foundation provided free legal representation, forensic accounting services, and support for people whose spouses had hidden assets or committed fraud during divorce. "Too many people go through what I experienced," Olivia explained to the Los Angeles Times reporter interviewing her about the foundation. "They trust their partners, sign documents they don't understand, and end up financially destroyed while their abusers walk away wealthy. We're going to change that." The foundation's first case involved a woman whose husband had hidden $2 million in cryptocurrency before filing for divorce. Using the same investigative techniques Kane's team had developed for Olivia's case, they recovered every penny and secured additional penalties for fraud. Within 6 months, the Harrison Foundation had helped 43 victims of financial abuse recover over $12 million in hidden assets. News organizations called it the most successful victim advocacy organization in California. Olivia had also used her inheritance to restart her marketing career, but on her own terms. She'd purchased a beautiful office building in Santa Monica and launched Thompson Strategic Marketing, focusing on helping ethical businesses grow and succeed. Her first clients included several nonprofit organizations and small businesses owned by women who had rebuilt their lives after difficult divorces. Her personal life had transformed as well. The tiny apartment was now a memory, replaced by a beautiful home in Manhattan Beach with an ocean view. She'd bought herself a reliable car, invested in quality clothes, and taken the European vacation she'd dreamed about during her marriage but never been able to afford. But the most significant change was internal. The broken, humiliated woman who had signed those divorce papers 8 months ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more confident, and completely in control of her own destiny. Olivia was reviewing foundation cases in her home office when Kane called with an update about Trevor's situation. "He's filed for bankruptcy," Kane reported. "Personal and business. He owes more money than he can possibly repay, and his earning potential is essentially zero. No one in the real estate industry will work with him." "What about Natalie? Last I heard she was engaged to someone new. A venture capitalist in San Francisco. She's been telling people she barely knew Trevor and was shocked to learn about his criminal behavior." Olivia smiled grimly. Natalie had successfully moved on to her next wealthy target, leaving Trevor completely alone with the consequences of his choices. "There's something else," Kane added. "Trevor's attorneys approached me about a possible meeting. They want to discuss some kind of settlement or payment arrangement." "What kind of settlement?" "They didn't specify, but reading between the lines, I think Trevor wants to apologize. Maybe ask for help finding work or some small financial assistance." Olivia considered this for a long moment. Part of her was curious to see Trevor in his current diminished state. Part of her wondered if he'd learned anything from losing everything. But mostly she realized she didn't care what Trevor wanted anymore. "Tell his attorneys no," she said finally. "I have nothing to discuss with Trevor Harrison. He made his choices and now he has to live with the consequences." "Are you sure? It might give you closure to hear him acknowledge what he did to you." "I don't need Trevor's acknowledgement for closure," Olivia replied. "I have something better than that. I have justice. I have my life back. And I have the ability to help other people who went through what I did." After hanging up with Kane, Olivia walked out to her deck overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. She thought about the night 8 months ago when she discovered Trevor and Natalie celebrating her destruction on the deck of the Malibu beach house. That night she'd felt like her life was over. She'd been humiliated, financially ruined, and completely hopeless. Now she owned multiple properties, ran a successful foundation, and had helped dozens of other people recover from similar betrayals. She turned her pain into purpose and her victimization into victory. Trevor, meanwhile, was working for minimum wage and sleeping on someone's couch, still paying the price for believing he was smarter than everyone else. Justice had been served completely. 1 year after Harold Harrison's will reading, Olivia stood in the ballroom of the Beverly Hills Hotel, accepting an award from the California Bar Association for her work with the Harrison Foundation. The same ballroom where she'd once attended charity galas with Trevor, introducing him to the connections that built his wealth. Now she was here on her own merit, being honored for helping victims of financial abuse recover over $30 million in stolen assets. "The Harrison Foundation has revolutionized how we approach financial misconduct in family law," the presenter announced. Under Olivia Thompson's leadership, they've achieved a 95% success rate in asset recovery cases and provided free legal services to over 200 victims of financial abuse. The audience applauded as Olivia accepted the Crystal Award. Looking out at the crowd, she recognized many faces, attorneys, judges, business leaders, journalists. People who had once known her only as Trevor Harrison's wife, now knew her as a successful advocate and businesswoman in her own right. After the ceremony, Olivia was approached by Maria Santos, a woman she'd met 6 months earlier. "I wanted to thank you again," Maria said, tears in her eyes. "If the foundation hadn't helped me, I never would have recovered what my ex-husband stole. My children and I would have lost everything." Maria's case had been particularly complex. Her husband had hidden assets in multiple countries and used sophisticated shell companies to avoid detection. But the foundation's forensic accountants had traced every transaction and recovered $2.8 million plus penalties. "You don't need to thank me," Olivia replied. "I'm just glad we could help. How are you and the kids doing now?" "Amazing. I started my own catering business with part of the recovered money, and it's already profitable. My daughter is enrolled in the college she dreamed of attending. We have our own home again." Maria smiled through her tears. "You gave us our lives back." Conversations like this one reminded Olivia why her work mattered. Every success story represented a family that hadn't been destroyed by financial abuse, children whose futures hadn't been stolen, women who'd been able to rebuild their lives with dignity. After the event, Olivia drove home to Manhattan Beach, where she'd been living for the past 8 months. The house was modern and beautiful but not ostentatious. She'd learned the difference between wealth that served a purpose and wealth that was just for show. Her phone rang as she was changing out of her formal gown. The caller ID showed Robert Kane. "Congratulations on the award," Kane said. "Well-deserved recognition for incredible work." "Thank you. It feels good to be acknowledged for building something positive. I have some news you might find interesting. Trevor Harrison was arrested yesterday." Olivia paused in the middle of hanging up her dress. "Arrested for what?" "Tax evasion and fraud related to his recent bankruptcy filing. Apparently, he tried to hide some remaining assets from the bankruptcy court. The FBI has been investigating for months." Olivia sat down on her bed, processing this information. Even after losing everything, Trevor had continued lying and cheating. How much trouble is he in? Federal charges carry serious penalties. He's looking at possibly 3 to 5 years in prison if convicted, plus additional financial penalties he can't afford to pay. And Natalie? No connection to his recent crimes. She's been completely separated from him since the will reading. Actually, I heard she got married last month to that venture capitalist in San Francisco. After ending the call, Olivia walked out to her deck overlooking the ocean. The news about Trevor's arrest didn't bring her the satisfaction she might have expected a year ago. Instead, she felt mostly indifferent. Trevor had become irrelevant to her life. Her phone rang again, this time showing a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Thompson? This is Jennifer Walsh from ABC News. We're doing a follow-up story on the Harrison inheritance case, and we'd love to interview you about your foundation's work." "I'd be happy to discuss the foundation," Olivia replied. "But I don't want to focus on my personal situation with Trevor Harrison. That's in the past. Of course, we're more interested in the positive impact you've created. Your story of turning personal tragedy into advocacy for others is really inspiring." After scheduling the interview, Olivia reflected on how much her perspective had changed. A year ago, her entire focus had been on making Trevor pay for what he'd done to her. Now, Trevor's latest legal troubles felt like a footnote to her real story. Her real story was the foundation that helped hundreds of people recover stolen assets. Her real story was Thompson Strategic Marketing, which now employed 12 people and worked with ethical businesses across the country. Her real story was the beautiful life she'd built for herself, surrounded by meaningful work and genuine friendships. A few days later, Olivia was reviewing foundation cases in her Santa Monica office when her assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," Sarah said. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal. His name is James Mitchell." Olivia looked up from her files. She didn't recognize the name, but something about Sarah's expression suggested this was important. "Send him in." James Mitchell was tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing jeans and a casual shirt that suggested he worked with his hands. "Miss Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you without an appointment. I'm a contractor. I worked on the renovation of your Manhattan Beach house last year." Olivia remembered him now. He'd been the project manager for her kitchen renovation, and she'd been impressed by his professionalism and attention to detail. "Of course, James. What can I do for you?" He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "This might sound strange, but I've been following the news about your foundation work. I think what you're doing is incredible. Thank you. That means a lot. I was wondering. He paused, gathering courage. Would you like to have dinner sometime? I know you're busy with important work and I'm just a contractor, but I'd really like to get to know you better. Olivia studied his face. There was no calculation there, no assessment of her wealth or status. Just genuine interest and admiration for who she was as a person. It had been over a year since she'd considered dating anyone. Her marriage to Trevor had left her wary of trusting men, especially men who might be attracted to her money. But something about James felt different. He'd known her before she became wealthy, and he was asking her out because of her character, not her bank account. I'd like that, she said, surprising herself. His face lit up with a genuine smile. Really? I was sure you'd say no. Why would I say no? Because you're this amazing successful woman, and I'm just a guy who builds cabinets for a living. Olivia laughed. James, I used to work at a coffee shop. Success isn't about what job you have, it's about who you are as a person. And from what I remember, you're a good person. They made plans for dinner that weekend. As James left her office, Olivia realized she was looking forward to it more than she'd expected. For the first time in years, she was interested in someone who wanted to know her, not use her. That evening, Olivia drove past the Malibu beach house where she discovered Trevor and Natalie celebrating her destruction. The house was dark now. Trevor had been forced to sell it months ago. New owners had changed the landscaping and painted the exterior a different color. She didn't feel the anger anymore when she looked at the place where her marriage had truly ended. She felt grateful. That night of betrayal and humiliation had ultimately led her to this life. A life where she controlled her own destiny, helped others who faced similar challenges, and was open to new possibilities. Trevor was sitting in a jail cell, facing years in prison for crimes that stemmed from the same greed and dishonesty that had destroyed their marriage. Natalie was probably planning her next wedding to her next wealthy husband, having learned nothing from her time with Trevor. But Olivia had learned everything. She'd learned that real wealth came from meaningful work and genuine relationships. She'd learned that the best revenge was building something positive from the ruins of betrayal. She'd learned that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. As she drove home along the Pacific Coast Highway, Olivia thought about her dinner date with James. She thought about the foundation cases she'd review tomorrow. She thought about the new marketing clients who wanted her expertise. She thought about the life she'd built, not just with Harold Harrison's money, but with her own courage, determination, and refusal to let Trevor's betrayal define her future. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Olivia had watched many sunsets from this highway during the darkest months after her divorce, wondering if she'd ever feel hopeful again. Sometimes, Christopher admitted. But then I remember that brave, loving people like you always find a way to create the families and communities they need. If it hadn't been my door, it would have been someone else's door, because you never would have given up on protecting Caleb. But I'm glad it was your door. I'm glad it was my door too, sweetheart. It was the best knock I've ever answered. As Christopher tucked Destiny into bed in her new room, surrounded by photos of all the families they had helped stay together, he realized that their story was still being written. Every family they reunited, every child they comforted, every system they improved was another chapter in the story that had started with a little girl's desperate courage during a snowstorm. The forever family they had built together was proof that love, kindness, and hope could overcome any crisis. And their work ensured that other families would have the same opportunity to stay together, to heal together, and to build new definitions of what family could be. The little girl who had begged for shelter had become a young advocate for children everywhere. The billionaire who had opened his door had found his life's purpose. The parents who had nearly lost everything had become leaders in family crisis support. Together, they had created not just a family, but a legacy of compassion that would help families for generations to come. Their story was no longer about survival. It was about hope, growth, and the incredible power of choosing to love and care for each other across all boundaries and circumstances. And every night, as they said their gratitude prayers before bed, they thanked the snowstorm that had brought them together and the courage of a 6-year-old girl who had refused to let her family be separated by crisis. The Williams Foundation continued to grow, but the Williams-Blake family remained at its heart, living proof that the most powerful force in the world is the decision to open your door and your heart to those who need help the most.